Greetings, humans. My name is Wheelman, and today I want to talk about RWBY Grimm Eclipse, which, if you're not familiar, is a Steam game based on a show made by Rooster Teeth. If you've never seen the show, you should do that, because it's a great show. But as far as the game goes, there was an update, and it's game update number 3, and it has made the game more interesting. And you can kind of interpret that either as interesting in a good way or interesting in a bad way. I've seen a lot of divisive comments. I tend to think it's awesome. I think all the changes that they made are really cool. I'm a big fan of this game, you can probably tell. But enough about that, let's just go into what they changed with the game. So, the big changes involve combat, camera, enemy AI, the ability to play games offline solo, and some changes to the control scheme, as well as your basic bug fixes that come with pretty much any update to a Steam game or a PC game in general. Improvements to combat, just to go into a couple of specifics here, are heavy attacks that now do more damage and can be charged, but they take longer to actually perform the attack. There's a new counter system in the game. Grimm will become open to a timed counter before they attack, and this kind of leaves them in a stunned state. There are team attacks now. You can finish off Grimm that have been stunned by teammates with a special team finisher. And the attacks formerly known as specials, which were accessed by holding down the right trigger and then pressing your regular attack buttons, have been replaced with ultimates, which are sort of the same thing, but they're accessed not by a unique menu, but rather automatically triggered after a certain number of hits of your regular light and heavy attacks. There are also plenty of combos still in the game, and new combos even, so I'll go into that in a little bit here. Updates to the camera are pretty basic. It used to be that the camera was zoomed a little bit farther out. They've pulled the camera in closer to the characters so that you're getting more detail of the character models, and then the camera will zoom out slightly. It's a transition that I didn't even actually consciously notice while playing, so they made it really smooth, which is nice, but it will pull out for combat sequences only. Additionally, the camera now tries to auto-center itself behind your character as you're playing. This doesn't always work exactly, which actually is probably a good thing because it would be a little bit obnoxious if it was trying to constantly snap to dead center, but you can also manually snap it to dead center just using the left trigger. It's a dedicated button. That's the only function of the left trigger, to snap the camera to being centered behind the character model. Enemy AI has been altered slightly so that the attack and defense of the Grimm that you fight is a little bit more varied now. Grimm will now attempt to block flurries of light attacks in various ways, but this will also leave them vulnerable to damage from heavier attacks. So it encourages the player to switch up their playstyle between a mixture of light and heavy attacks and various combos as well. Grimm can also be stunned by performing counters. As I mentioned earlier, this leaves them wide open, again, for combos and charged heavy attacks. Additionally, some of the ranged attacks have been changed, and I will go into that in just a few moments when I go over my experience playing the game solo. Speaking of playing the game solo, there's now an offline solo play mode. It used to be that the game was locked into multiplayer co-op only, so you were forced, even if you didn't have 3 friends to play with, you were forced into a game with 3 randoms. Playing online games with random players always runs the risk of people griefing or just not knowing what the hell to do. But even if it doesn't go that far, the ability to play solo still allows you to get a better feel for the game and take your time and move at your own pace through the game, and even be able to hear the dialogue a bit better. If you're in a Skype call playing with your friends, you're not going to really be able to hear what's going on quite as well. Finally, control scheme changes are one of the biggest things that they've changed about the game. These are the new schemes for keyboard and mouse and both Xbox and PlayStation controllers. I play the game using an Xbox 360 controller. It works fantastically well. It works a lot better with a controller than it works with mouse and keyboard, purely because it's a hack and slash game that uses fighting combos, and that it's just that style of game that caters itself to controller use. I definitely didn't have any problems outright with the old control scheme. However, the new control scheme works really well, in my opinion. The addition of some dedicated buttons for certain things is really helpful, particularly, again, with regard to the dedicated right trigger for your ranged attack, which in most characters' cases is a gun of some kind, of course, and the camera button on the left trigger. It's not something you necessarily will use super often, but when you do need it, it's there and it helps. So, what are some things that I noticed while playing through the game on each of the 4 characters solo? Well, to begin with, right off the bat, as you probably can hear in the video, and as you've heard us joke about if you've watched the first part of my Let's Play, with some friends of the previous build of this game is that the pots, when you break them to find XP, are still incredibly loud, jarringly loud in comparison to the rest of the soundscape that's offered in the game. This would not be so much of a problem if it weren't so startling, and actually the more pots you break at once, whether you're using a ranged attack or a melee attack, the louder it gets. It seems to exponentially increase in volume, or at least double or triple in volume when you're breaking a bunch of pots at once. This is annoying, especially when you're wearing headphones and it is late at night and you're not exactly expecting to be startled like that. It's a very sharp sound, and that's definitely something that they need to fix. I don't see it listed in the update list of known issues. It's got to be something that other people are experiencing and that Rooster Teeth is working on, but if anybody else is having this issue, let me know in the comments because I'm curious. I think it's pretty funny, but it's also kind of annoying. So, one of the main things I noticed when switching between characters and playing as all of the members of Team RWBY is that some of the characters definitely have a different feel than others, and I think that's a good thing. Blake is purposefully a little bit floatier than, let's say, a character like Yang. She can hang in the air longer, and it suits her combat style a lot better. Speaking of Yang and combat styles, her punching attack, which you can use pretty much endlessly, the shotgun punch blast, used to be able to hold off waves and waves of enemies just with that alone, based on the fact that it did really pretty high damage and would push enemies back as you hit them. That still works to a degree, however, that particular ranged attack has had its range decreased significantly. You can feel it, especially when you play as Yang and go up to some crates to find some XP or some pots, as I mentioned, and try to do that. You now have to be at least an arm's length closer, if not even more so, to be able to break the pots. Otherwise, it basically the ranged projectile disappears entirely. So that's an interesting change, and it probably balances out Yang a lot better with regard to play further on down in the game as it gets a little bit more difficult. Going back to Blake for a moment, her area of effect attack is definitely doing a lot more damage now than it was before. It's a lot more effective, and that's an area in which it feels like all four characters have been balanced out pretty evenly. The AoE attacks, while they don't visually look all the same, seem, at least at first, before upgrading them significantly, to do roughly the same thing. There's a faster sprint in the game on the left bumper. Sprint was a function that existed in the game before. Basically, if you tap left bumper, your character will dash, and if you hold it, then your character will dash and then move right into a sprint. However, sprinting was not too much faster than just running with the analog stick before. However, now the sprint is significantly faster, so it makes world traversal a lot more fun, varied, and interesting, especially when you're moving between combat zones just kind of through the environment. You feel like you have a lot more speed, because you do. This is also useful for escaping specific types of Grimm that can be really obnoxious with their invincibility and charging attacks and that sort of thing. So getting out of their way and using the dash and sprint to your advantage is definitely advisable. As I noted before, there are plenty of new combos in the game, and it seems like they've altered the light and heavy attacks slightly. I know there's as I mentioned before, the tap Y to do a heavy and hold Y to do a charged heavy, but the light attacks for at least some of the characters, if not all of them, also seem to ramp. So if you're tapping X and just button mashing X, it's not just the same 2 or 3 light attacks over and over again. It will go into kind of its own combo, and of course, as I've said, combos exist for any number of button combinations between the light and heavy attacks that you could possibly think of. So, what can we look forward to as to the future of the game? Well, it's still in early access officially. It's still only $15 on Steam. As I've said many times before, if you're curious or you're on the fence, I absolutely recommend going for it. Even if you're into hack and slash, not necessarily just RWBY itself, it's a really solid hack and slash game, and it definitely seems like Rooster Teeth is supporting this full force with their games division, which is growing all the time, and personally I look forward to future game updates. If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely leave them down below, and look forward to the continuing Let's Plays on the remaining characters in this build of the game as well. I'm looking forward to recording those here shortly, and seeing what kind of antics we can get up to and getting them out to you guys. As more content comes out for the game, campaign-wise, story-wise, of course, I'll be releasing that as well, and you can expect pretty regular updates as they come out from Rooster Teeth to be relayed by me to you, because this game is awesome, and I stand behind it fully. Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day.
Network in this region is shipshape once again.